Welcome Trinidad and Tobago to our News 4 report, a product of the Government Information Services Limited and the Ministry of Communications. I'm Joseph Lopez. Let's take a look at the headlines. Trinidad and Tobago hosts the second meeting of the CARIFORUM EU Parliamentary Committee. The Justice Ministry offers scholarships to persons interested in the study of forensic pathology. And the Minister of Public Utilities apologizes to the nation for blackout. In our top story, this country played host to the second meeting of the CARIFORUM EU Parliamentary Committee. Trade Minister, the Honourable Vasant Bharath, said the meeting seeks to facilitate easier trade and travel between the Caribbean and European Union EU states.
The second meeting of the CARIFORUM and EU Parliamentary Committee saw greater focus placed on the Economic Partnership Agreement, EPA. The parliamentary delegation brought together regional states and members of the European Community and was the second joint meeting held in Trinidad and Tobago. Trade Minister Vasant Bharath hailed the meeting as one that brought to the forefront a number of outstanding issues, one of them being the easier trade and travel between both regions.
Both sides see this agreement as being very important with regard to the access of opportunities, both to CARIFORUM as well as to the European Union. But we felt that there were some obstacles, and therefore we needed to discuss those and a way forward with regard to those obstacles, those perceived obstacles. One of them was the ability to travel freely in and out, and the fact that it was difficult at times with the use of the Schengen visa and that methodology to be able to have access to the European markets.
Minister Bharath says through the EPA, trade and service access to the European market was made easier. However, he adds that this agreement should not be solely based on a country's GDP.
Where the CARIFORUM countries felt that differentiation with regard to granting of funds ought not to be based purely on the GDP of each country, but on other factors that certainly could impinge upon governance and poverty levels and so on. So we felt that particularly if one were to, for example, look at Trinidad and Tobago, although we may have a very high GDP, when one looks at the fact of the distribution of income throughout Trinidad and Tobago, you'll find that there is a skewing of distribution. So the indicator of GDP may be misleading, and then that was what influenced some of the discussions today.
Discussions also saw how matters affecting Caribbean states will be taken into consideration by the EU in its attempt to deepen relations with the region. Spearheading this on behalf of the EU was David Martin, chairman of the European delegation, who assured its commitment to strengthening the process.
What we discovered today, and what was emphasised very strongly by our Caribbean friends today, was that the visa requirement, which means that you get access to one country, but as soon as you move out of that one country to another European country, you then have to apply for another visa, causes great difficulties here, and they want to see the general visa exemption for the Schengen area applied. And we committed ourselves to go back and to discuss this with our parliamentary colleagues. There's already a proposal before the European Parliament to tackle this issue, and we're going to try and expedite it. I can't promise we'll succeed, but we're going to try and expedite that arrangement. One of the objectives of the EPA is to encourage regional integration, and that support will carry on without any diminution. We will not reduce our support for regional integration in the Caribbean. Between 2012 and 2015, just to give you one example, one period, we will be spending €147 million helping the Caribbean countries integrate with one another.
Trinidad and Tobago's Trade Minister says the meeting also facilitated a greater understanding and the removal of a number of hurdles met with attempting to conduct trade with the EU, and described it as a step forward.
This agreement allows for strengthening of trade, but to be able to do that, you've got to, in reality, ensure that there are no obstacles or hurdles, because far too often what we have, or what we find, is that we sign bilateral agreements with countries, and these agreements just sit on shelves and they're not activated. So we want to ensure that through these meetings, we understand what the hurdles and challenges are, so we can remove them and actually start trading. So this meeting really was to try and understand some of the issues which we both ventilated just now, or just highlighted. And once we can remove those issues, then it makes it a lot easier for trade to take place between the CARIFORUM region and the EU.
David Martin, chairman of the European delegation, says the EU is looking at making EPA services greater known among Caribbean nationals and called for the establishment of a committee comprising of members of civil society within the region. Kimberly Ramkalawan, News 4.
The labour report issued by the Central Statistical Office on the first 2 quarters of 2012 showed positive signs of growth in the local workforce. The report, which highlights an increase in females in the sector, also reveals positive contributions to the growth of the labour force in significant areas such as communications and the transport industry.
The Central Statistical Office is reporting an increase of 0.6% in the total labour force during the second quarter of 2012. The report issued states that the number of females in the total labour force has increased by 1.2%, despite the domination of males in the workforce, who represent 57.9% of the total labour force. Meanwhile, the CSO notes changes in key sectors such as transport, storage and communication, which saw a growth by 10.2% from 41,000 persons to 45,200 persons employed. Community, social and personal services also saw an increase in the workforce by 3.7%. Persons classified in the labour force for these industrial groups accounted for 41% of the total workforce during this period in 2012. It also recorded growth of professionals in the defence force, clerks and shop workers, while significant decreases were noted among skilled workers such as craft and machine operators. Further analysis reveals that the total number of unemployed in the construction industry decreased from 12,200 to 8,800 in the second quarter. The report also records a total labour force participation rate remaining unchanged at 61.8%. Kimberly Ramkalawan, News 4.
After the break, the Justice Ministry offers scholarships to persons interested in studying forensic pathology. Stay with us.
Never leave items like MP3 players, portable DVD players, laptops and briefcases on view inside your vehicle. It is an open invitation for a thief. Don't leave them on show. If you cannot take them with you, place them in the trunk of your car. Remember, crime prevention is everyone's business. A message from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
Welcome back. The Justice Ministry will be offering scholarships for persons interested in studying forensic pathology. Senator and Justice Minister Chrislyn Moore made the announcement during this week's post-cabinet media briefing, even as she announced plans to build a new forensic centre in Cassenfield.
Justice Minister Chrislyn Moore says steps are being taken to address the deficiency of pathologists in the country. Speaking to reporters at this week's post-cabinet media briefing, Minister Moore says while working in the forensic sector is a taboo one across the world, her ministry is looking at ways in which scholarships will be given to persons interested in making a career in the field.
We have been trying to encourage entrance to the field by offering scholarships. And that is where we are at this time. We are really trying to encourage persons who are interested in related fields to consider crossing over, as it were. But our shortage is regrettably not unique to us, and other countries have dealt with this. And they've dealt with it by allowing complementary disciplines, let's say, to perform the service.
She adds that regulating the field for persons entering and practicing forensic pathology includes ensuring that proper registration is provided through the Medical Board Act. This includes recognition of these specialized areas, enabling persons to fulfill the role effectively.
I am collaborating with the other related ministry on the question of the amendments that I believe are necessary to the Medical Board Act to facilitate registration and to make the parameters for registration of this particular discipline more certain. One must know what is required for registration before one embarks on a course of study. And currently it is not at all apparent. So that should afford some certainty to entrance into the field.
Meanwhile, Minister Moore announced plans to open a new forensic centre in Carson Field. The site has already been earmarked for the construction of a new judicial centre and is said to have capacity for the holding of a new forensic facility.
The intention is that the Carson Field Judicial Centre would also be aligned to or neighbor to the new Forensic Science Center. Indeed, the 62 acres that have been allocated to the judicial complex are obviously quite large, too large to only accommodate a court alone. So with regard to the best and optimum utilization of the lands that have been awarded, the Cabinet has decided that the judicial center would be housed there. And on parts of these lands, the Forensic and Pathology Services Center will also be housed at Carson Field.
Kimberly Ram-Calawan, News 4.
Still with post-cabinet media briefing, cooperation between this country and the United States has resulted in the successful extradition of Doreen Alexander to the United States on March 31st. The charges come regarding her alleged role in the 2005 kidnapping of naturalized U.S. citizen Balram Balo Maharaj. Communications Minister Jamal Mohammed hailed the role of Attorney General Anand Ramlogan played in the process as communicated by the United States Embassy.
A communique issued by the U.S. Embassy, U.S. Trinidad and Tobago Corporation on Doreen Alexander extradition, and part of the communique states, the U.S. Embassy recognizes the valuable assistance of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, especially the Attorney General Anand Ramlogan, in effecting this extradition. So we have to give and shower praises upon our Attorney General for maintaining excellent bilateral relations, particularly with the State Department and the United States of America.
Up next, the 8th Annual Women and Girls in Sport Festival. Stay with us.
Honoring and respecting the elderly begins with you and me. And in the event of a disaster, your support before, during, and after will be critical to their well-being. Build a support team where each member will have a specific task. Your team must include someone who is within easy reach of the elderly person. Make an evacuation plan and practice your plan. Stock up on special caregiving items such as incontinence items, cleaning and sanitizing supplies. Have on hand a minimum of 2 weeks supply of all essential medications. In the event of a disaster, accessing medication may become difficult. Keep testing and insulin supplies that do not require refrigeration for diabetics. Secure all medical supplies in a clean, waterproof, easy-to-carry container. Keep a list of medication, caregiving instruction, doctors' names, and contact information. In case an elderly person is relocated to a shelter, this information is vital to their continued care. Dehydration is a serious health problem for older adults. Store at least 1 gallon per person per day. Store at least 3 days' worth. Consider special dietary needs when stocking up on food supplies. Safeguard important documents and provide an ID bracelet or necklace to persons with special needs, such as persons with Alzheimer's disease. Remember, disaster readiness and preparedness begins with you and me.
A message from the Ministry of National Security, Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management.
The Ministry of Sport will host its 8th Annual Women and Girls in Sport Festival, scheduled for Saturday, April 13 at the Eastern Regional Sport Complex and Hediad Grounds in Tacarigua. Sporting categories for this event will include netball, football, hockey, cricket, basketball, table tennis, 5K, and many more fun activities. This year, the event will pay tribute to one of our sporting heroes. And here's Wayne Cunningham with the details.
The Women and Girls in Sport Festival is a program carried out annually by the Ministry of Sport in recognition of the Brighton Declaration on Women and Sport. Diane Rampadarat, Planning Officer at the Ministry of Sport, told us more about the declaration.
In May 1994, the Women's Sport and Challenge of Change Conference, which took place in Brighton, England, brought together key decision makers to address various issues. One of them included the issue of gender inequality and the challenges faced by women and girls in their participation and involvement in sport. One of the key outcomes of this conference was the development of the Brighton Declaration, which outlines a comprehensive set of guiding principles for the development of increased opportunities for women and girls to participate in sport. Some of these key principles which were developed include equity and equality in sport, total participation in sport, provision of facilities, high-performance sport, leadership in sport, education, training and development in sport.
Ruth Martian is Deputy Director of Sport and Physical Education at the Ministry, and she outlined what we can expect at the festival.
This Women and Girls in Sports Festival is really about us at the Ministry providing an avenue for fun and games. It targets all age groups, it's about fun and games. We don't want the public to feel it's about the elite or clubs that are already in training. It's about it's community-based where people could just come out and have fun. At those same games, we have scouts. A lot of the coordinators that coordinate the various sporting disciplines are aligned to national teams, so there's also opportunities for persons who within various sporting disciplines to be seen, the unseen to be seen, in other words.
National sporting organizations also have to play their part in the ongoing drive for greater participation by females.
We want to encourage the NSOs that from the administrative aspect of and the strategic aspect of dealing with the sport, encourage them to continue in the fight to get more women and more girls especially involved in the program, because there's a significant drop in females participating in sport on the whole. And it really, the foundation lies within the NSOs to really create a pathway that will encourage and sell the sport in a way that it will encourage young girls to participate in the sport.
The boys and men are expected to play a vital role.
A lot of guys are the spectators on the day and they support the women, right? So in terms of not only, remember when you're looking at the promotion of sport, the spectatorship is very important. That is what helps motivate and encourage the same young girls that play in the sport, the family members, the brothers, the boyfriends, they come out and they are very supportive on the day.
This year, the event will pay tribute to Peggy Castaneda, a former Trinidad and Tobago standout in netball. Castaneda, a netball coach for 30 years under the Ministry of Sport, will retire from the ministry this year.
It's only fitting that we pay tribute to Peggy Castaneda. All right, the world of netball knows her. She's well respected in Trinidad and Tobago, not only on the field, but also in the area of administration and all aspects of netball. She's well respected. And what we're trying to do is to honor in a way that is fitting to a queen of netball. Peggy is the queen of netball. All right, and give her that respect that she deserves. And I would hope that not only from the ministry angle, but the NSO angle, honor her in not only in a way that to fit into an athlete, but somebody that could continue the journey in terms of the development of the sport. Whether it is they produce some kind of Peggy Castaneda classic in her name.
The national sporting hero was humble when discussing the tribute.
Well, it's something good for me because I've been here, it's like my home, ministry, for the last 30 years. And what is so funny, I started working at the Ministry of Sport. At that time was Sport, Culture and Youth Affairs on the 13th of April, 1983. And the Women and Girls Sport that they are paying tribute to me, it's on the 13th of April, 2013, exactly 30 years. You know, so that in itself, 13 is a special number for me. Although it's unlucky for some people, but it has been a special number. And I think it's an honor to be treated in that manner, especially from your workplace.
We'll have more from Peggy Castaneda in a subsequent newscast. Wayne Cunningham, News 4 Sports.
When we return, the Minister of Public Utilities apologizes for Good Friday's blackout, and Caribbean Airlines repaints its first aircraft in-house. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Civilian Conservation Corps continues to do its part to ensure that youths of Trinidad and Tobago are equipped with the necessary skills and potential for self-dependency and positive societal contributions. This as the program recently held its graduation ceremony cycle 1301.
Hundreds of youths from across Trinidad and Tobago have graduated from the Civilian Conservation Corps program. The graduation ceremony cycle 1301 took place at the UTT O'Meara campus and saw the end of a 6-month program for the young persons and a start to endless possibilities based on their newly acquired skills. The program, which falls under the Ministry of National Security, is designed to empower the socially marginalized young adults between the ages of 16 to 25 years to improve their overall quality of life. Addressing the graduating class and their parents, Program Director Major Cheryl Richardson says those enrolled can only seek to be the beneficiaries of life-changing skills and experiences.
The 6 short months spent on this program has holistically developed and empowered these young trainees to be better persons. However, continued support is critical to the furtherance of this life-changing process. I urge all parents, guardians, loved ones, and friends present here today, as well as those of you concerned with the development of the youth of our nation, to commit to providing the adequate support and care for young people to grow into dependable and productive adults.
Major Richardson cited many of the ills in society, recognizing the important role that such a program can play in the realization of a better, safer society. She detailed the impacts of the program that the facilitators strive for.
CCC certainly provides both prevention and intervention services. We take our young people from resignation to possibility. Our methods support the development of critical educational and social outcomes for youth, including decreased involvement in gangs, decreased violence, and teen sexual activity, development of a goal-directed behavior, increased attendance at work and training, new ways of thinking, a chance at a new and different life.
Graduates of the program have achieved goals in the areas of tertiary education, law enforcement, the military, teaching, nursing, and journalism, to name a few. On February 4th, 1993, the then cabinet agreed to the establishment of the Civilian Conservation Corps, and thus the CCC was officially created. The first cycle of the CCC program began on June 14th, 1993, and 743 trainees in 4 regions. Since then, the program has grown tremendously and trained more than 35,000 youths. For News 4, I am Nikolai Edwards.
The Minister of Public Utilities, the Honorable Nizam Bakhsh, is apologizing for last Friday's electrical blackout. The blackout lasted several hours and affected the entire country.
Preventative measures are being put in place to ensure a blackout, such as the one which occurred last Friday, never occurs again. This is the assurance being given by Public Utilities Minister Nizam Bakhsh. The minister gives the assurance while issuing an apology for the incident on behalf of the stakeholders. Minister Bakhsh is thanking citizens for maintaining law and order during the blackout. The minister's apology comes as he officially turns on the lights at the Barakpur Islamic Center's recreation ground located on Rochard Douglas Road in Barrackpore.
Allow me to offer my sincerest apology to you, the residents of Barrackpore and environs, and of course the national community, for last Friday's unprecedented blackout. We have to make an apology, and I think people are quite cool and comfortable in the sense that, you know, we didn't have any disturbances and so, like you could read in some countries. Once you have a blackout, you have a lot of repercussions there. So we thank all those citizens of Trinidad and Tobago for bearing with us.
Minister Baksh says the preventative measures will result in a more dependable supply of electricity nationwide.
As the minister responsible for your electricity supply, I have taken steps along with TNTech, PowerGen and other stakeholders to ensure that such an incident never occurs again. In fact, we are actively involved in building capacity and facilitating processes that will result in a safer and more reliable supply to the customer.
Energy Minister Senator the Honorable Kevin Ramnarine has also pledged to oversee technical reforms which will severely reduce the likelihood of a reoccurrence of last Friday's nationwide blackout. Gregory McBurney, News 4.
For the first time, Caribbean Airlines Limited has facilitated the repainting of one of the aircrafts here in Trinidad and Tobago by internationally trained locals.
State-owned Caribbean Airlines Limited continues to explore options which will see its dependency on the state's finances lessened. CAL will soon unveil one of its Boeing 737 aircrafts, which is currently being repainted completely in-house, a first for the airline. By bringing the repainting process in-house, Caribbean Airlines will achieve cost savings of approximately $350,000. This includes savings from not flying the aircraft to an external service provider, which incurs costs for incidentals such as fuel and crew expenses. The airline's maintenance and engineering teams were specially trained by PPG Aerospace, the global suppliers of the coatings and service materials which are used to prepare and paint the aircraft in the airline's livery. PPG are world leaders in environmentally friendly coatings and demonstrated their commitment to the airline with free training and development of local skills in the application and process of their aerospace materials. The aircraft will be fully painted without any adhesive decals and will also be hand polished regularly to maintain fuel savings by reducing drag, the measurement of wind resistance to the aircraft as it flies through the air. The airline repaints each of its aircrafts every 5 years as part of its general maintenance. This latest move is expected to not only see short-term and medium-term benefits, but also has the potential to create jobs and significantly lessen the airline's expenses. Nikolai Edwards, News 4.
And that story brings us to the end of our News 4 report, a product of the Government Information Services Limited and the Ministry of Communications. I'm Joseph Lopez. Thank you for watching.